Last week, the Supreme Court reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend without limit in our elections.
Remember that little ditty from the State of the Union back in 2012? President Obama speaking about that decision from the Supreme Court revolving around Citizens United. You see Justice Samuel Alito there shaking his head no and mouthing the words, "not true." Joining us right now, Tim Constantine, columnist for the Washington Times, also host of the Tim Constantine Capitol Hill Show. Tim, let's talk about this. You know, President Obama likes to call out the Supreme Court a little bit. Fast forward to from the 2012 State of the Union to the president speaking last week at the G7 summit. Let's take a listen to that.
This should be an easy case. Frankly, it probably shouldn't even been taken up. Since we're going to get a ruling pretty quick, I think it's important for us to go ahead and assume that the Supreme Court's going to do what most legal scholars who've looked at this would expect them to do.
Well, Tim, you've taken a close look at this issue here. Has there ever been a president in recent memory that has been this, I don't know if disrespectful is the right word, but this willing to take on the Supreme Court?
It's absolutely disrespectful. You know, there's a certain decorum in Washington. There's a behind-the-scenes, dirty, nasty thing that just is politics. But when you see senators who don't even speak to one another when they're off the floor, when you see them on the floor, they will always refer to my good friend from Virginia. There is a certain decorum that goes on in Washington and is expected in Washington. But this president has tossed that out the window. Understanding there are three co-equal branches of government, any constitutional law professor, as he claimed to be when he ran for president, would understand that. But as president, he seems to not care. He is so disrespectful to the Supreme Court, it's embarrassing.
Well, in fact, you write that as the U.S. Supreme Court considers parts of the Obamacare law, we were reminded that maybe Obama wasn't such an expert on the Constitution after all, or that he has no respect for it. So which one do you think he disrespects more, the Constitution or the Supreme Court?
Well, I think he knows all. You know, I wrapped up that piece by saying he knows better than the 9 Supreme Court justices and our founding fathers. Obviously, he doesn't, but I think in Barack Obama's mind, he does. I think he believes he has all the solutions. He knows all the answers. He knows better than Washington and Jefferson, and certainly better than Justice Roberts and Scalia.
And he appeared to think better than, or know better rather than a federal judge in Texas and an appellate court bench of justices in New Orleans as well with his executive orders. Do you think this issue with Obamacare might be a bigger constitutional embarrassment for the president than perhaps the embarrassment he's already facing with his executive orders on immigration?
You know, there are a lot of folks that think he may win this one, but nobody's sure. And when he says, well, I think we need to go ahead and assume, you don't ever go ahead and assume what the Supreme Court is doing. I have friends that all they do is study the law. All they do is follow the Supreme Court. They don't know. I have a friend who used to clerk for one of the Supreme Court justices. He doesn't pretend to know. For the president to say, we should just go assume I'm right, it's a big blunder. And if the court rules against Obamacare, he's really going to look silly, and it's going to weaken him even further.
Yeah, and just yesterday we also heard Harry Reid saying that he hopes the Supreme Court could read English, which I think I'd be willing to bet that they probably can.
How is Harry Reid not get covered by the media for just lying and making things up? He's a guy who says literally whatever he wants on any given day, no basis in fact, and no one ever calls. We all just shrug our shoulders and go, that's Harry.
That's just Harry being Harry. Now he's got those sunglasses, which gives him even more cover. Tim, please do stick around. We want to talk a little bit more about the whole Hillary Clinton email situation. We'll talk about that when we come right back. Tim Constantine joining us from Washington, D.C. More ahead here on Newsmax Now, right after this.